Everyone. So we discuss about the yes, I think we can see my screen. Yeah. Hello everyone. So last lecture in the series of lecture about foundation of cybersecurity, we understood about up to the cryptography, right? We understood different cryptography, symmetric, asymmetric. We understood private key, public key. We also understood about the IAM, right? About the RBAC, about the ABAC, about the TAC. We understood about the threat modeling, security framework. We understood about the threat vulnerability and risk management. And then we understood about the introduction to cybersecurity, right? So after understanding these things, we will go to understand about the some kind of web application security and about the OWASP. Okay, about the OWASP means Open Worldwide Application Security Project, right? There are 10 principles. So we will understand about the web application security, and also we will talk about the Open Web Application Security Project that has a 10 fundamental rules. So according to those 10 rules, we will understand how web application security is developed and protected. Likewise, we will discuss. Okay, so let's start about the web application security. So we talk about the web application security. It's a practice. Web application security is nothing but it's a practice. Web application security is nothing but it's a practice. Okay, it's a practice. It's a practice of protecting websites. Protecting websites. Okay, what is the practice of protecting websites? Also, web application and APIs. APIs means application programming interface, kind of phone pay, Google Pay, these things, right? So protecting website, web applications, and APIs from the threat like a injection attack, okay, and kind of data breaching, kind of session hijacking, okay, session hijacking, session hijacking. So to secure the website, web application, and APIs from the threats like injection attack, data breaches, and session hijacking is kind of web application security, right? So it involves implementing security control throughout the software development life cycle. So it's provide the security control throughout the software development life cycle. So it's provide the security control throughout the software development life cycle. So it provides the security control throughout the software development life cycle. Okay, kind of this. Okay, provide the it involves implementing security control throughout the software development life cycle to ensure apps operate correctly despite attacks. Like suppose you are developing some application, so it provides the software development life cycle, right, to ensure apps operate correctly despite any attack. And key measure includes input validation, HTTPS, that means hypertext parameter security, right? That and regular testing against the OWASP, okay, that we already discussed, right? Now, if we talk about the OWASP, it is nothing but kind of Open Worldwide Application Security Project. It is formally known as the Open Web Application Security Project, right? Okay, OWASP is kind of Open Web Application Security Project. It is a non-profit foundation that works to improve the security of software through community led. So it's all about the OWASP. Okay, it's kind of open web application, open web application. Okay, then security, then project, right? Open web application security project. Okay, it is a non-profit foundation that works to improve the security of software through community-led open source project tools and documentation. Okay, we will talk about those OWASP top 10 things, and also we will understand about the more in detail about the web application securities. So we talk now just a foundation, right? What the definition, what are those things, and what we need like that. Okay, let's we go through the next slide and we will see what we are going to study in this discussion. So we will understand about the role of secure product practice in developing software and database, right? We will learn about the web application vulnerabilities and the common exploits. That means what are the weak things? What are the weak things in the web applications? Those can be exploited via threats. And we will also understand about the API vulnerabilities. Few of things. Although we will talk about the API security in the next lecture. Then we will also understand about the analyze threats to various application environments. Then we understand about the apply robust security measure in web application context. Okay. So through that we will understand about the kind of web security, mainly how the web or application need to be secure from what kind of the attacks possibilities. Okay, now we will understand what are the learning outcomes. Okay, when we talk about learning outcome, we will understand about the security requirement in software and database development. We will understand about the APIs and client server communication. Slowly we will get some knowledge about it, then later on in the API security chapter we'll understand more. Then we will identify common vulnerabilities and threats in web application, mobile application, and distributed software. Okay, also moreover we understand about the defensive mechanism against the any kind of attack. Okay, for the outline, world wide web we understand, we know world wide web means kind of using internet wave, right? And if we are using something, that means we are using wave, right? Suppose we are using wave, right? We are using wave, that means we are browsing or using app, right? If we are using something, definitely there is involved the data and maybe money, right? So that is important for the fast and effective and getting the more information, fast, effective, more information. But although it is helpful for the fast, effective, cost effective, and the more information, more data, right, making a like, easier. But although if those things are involved, data and money, that has definitely chances of the attack, right? There's a chances of the hackers attack, kind of the money attack, kind of the attack on the money. So these things, because there are the benefit, there are the benefit. So there are the benefits, so there are the process. Okay, there are the process, and this process has some valuable things. Those valuable things will be destroyed by attackers or hackers. Okay, okay, that kind of need to save, okay, that called a web application security. Okay, I hope you understood now. So World Wide Web client server architecture, that means depend on the some server and client application. Okay, session hijacking, we understand how to session hijack so that the information on the available on the web page will be hijacked, and that is not particularly secure. Most common attacks also we understand about the OWAP, that is the Open Worldwide Application Security Project details, that are kind of non-profit organization. Broken access control, and last we understand about the structured query language injection attacks. Those are the most possible attack on the kind of web application, right? Those are the most known attacks. Okay, then we will understand, then we will talk about the some summary. Okay, I think we understand about this outline. Let's see now how does World Wide Web works. Okay, so how World Wide Web works? Your browser. How World Wide Web works? Your browser generate a request to read, write, or delete some information or resource, basically files that are present in some other computer or server. So first what happens? First request goes. Okay, first what happens? Client make a request. Okay, then server consider the request and perform some check to see whether you are authorized to perform your request, and based on these checks, either accept or deny the request. If it is accepted, the resource is carried back to your browser, the client, right? So this is the client. These are the resources. Okay, these are the wave, right? So you're asking, they going to resources and they providing, then they provide if that is valid. That is valid. And in between, if some hijacking, some injectioning, some attacking happens, your information lost, right? Or your data information is not secure. You get the point? We understood now, I think. Hope so. Now, see if it is accepted, the resource is carried out to browser, the client. Okay. This information, this transfer of information between client and servers are done by a dedicated program called application programming interface. That's called the API. Okay. Now we understood. Client server, either front end back end connection is developed by the APIs. In web application security, we need to secure the browser, the server, and the communication like that API. So now there's a client, server, and API. All are there involved. And if we want secure connection, we need to secure all of them. Okay, that's how WWW World Wide Web work, and what the component and what are the security features need to apply on there. Okay, I hope we understood about it. Okay, now let's talk about the client server architecture. Okay, if we talk about the client server architecture, suppose what we have to get, if we see the diagram, right? If we see the diagram, we can understand properly. Client server architecture is a distributed application structure that partitions task or workload between the providers of a resource or service called server and service requested called a client. Okay, here if we see properly, it's a distributed application structure. Okay, where partition task or workload between the providers of a resources or service called a server. These are the server. Okay, this is a network. These are the server. These are the network. So this is a server. Okay. These are the network. Those are the client. Phone client, PC client, or the laptop client. Now it is affecting the client server relation, client server architecture, by requesting, by responding. Okay. So if we say it is a distributed application structure that partitions task or workload between the provider of the resources or server called servers, resources or service called servers, and services requester called clients. So here what happened? Here this client is a nothing but user facing device or application that requests a service or resources. Example, web browser, mobile app, desktop software. These are the clients. Okay. Now server is a centralized computer or a system. This is a centralized computer or a system. Okay, that processes requests, manage data, and delivers resources to clients. Example, web server, database server, or file server. Now network comes, third component. First component, client. Second component, server. Third component, network. CSN is a client server relationship. Now network, the communication channel like the internet or a local area network that connects client and server to exchange data. How it works? So how it works, you can see the sign off, request and response. We can see the sign of a request and response, right? A request and response. So what happened? The client sends a request to a server over the network, to the server. Now processing, the server receives the request, processing it, and retrieves the necessary data. Response, the server sends the request resources or an error message back to the client. Either response, either error message, whatever from server to the network goes to the client, right? What the advantage? Easy to manage backup, security, and update in one place, right? Disadvantage. Cons are single points of failure. If the server goes down, system fails. If server goes down, completely system fails. These are the 1 or 2 points I discussed. Okay. So if we say about those, there's one security measure. What is the security measure in that? centralized data storage, right? Here is a centralized data storage, right? Security measure is centralized data storage, one thing. But target of cyber attacks because all critical data is one place. That is benefit also, and that is a cons also because target is one for all server. Okay, that is cons also. So we understood about the client server architecture. Most common example is a web browsing, whatever browse in the Google. Suppose we are requesting facebook.com or any some information from the facebook.com. So what is network? Through the network it reaches to the Facebook. Facebook gives the data from the server. It comes to your phone, PC or laptop, right? So web browsing, your browser clients request a web page from a site like a Google, it's a server. Email, your mail app is a client, fetches messages from a mail server. Mail app is a client, fetches messages from a mail server. Online gaming, your console client sync game state with the game publisher server. File sharing, a corporate computer client accesses a shared file on a network drive server. Okay, like this are the client server architecture. Okay, I hope we understand this. If now we understand this, then let's come to the next one. Now, if the client server architecture is there, definitely that has a benefit. But if that benefit comes, definitely there are some vulnerabilities which can be exploited by the attackers or the threats. Okay. Now, what are the vulnerabilities? What are the vulnerabilities? Important vulnerabilities are browser store password, credit card information, and addresses, and other sensitive information. Attacker will want to access there. Attacker want to access them, right? Password, credit card information, addresses. API carries. So those are in the red color. Those are the vulnerability. That means those are the valuable or the big or important things which can be exploited by attackers. APIs carry these information from your browser to a server. So we need to secure API as well. So we need to secure the important things, API, server, and client. Now, server store those information as well, many other private sensitive information in their database. So one need to secure the server and database. Next, client and server use certain files called cookies and tokens to maintain session. If an attacker steals these files, then they try to get the identity of the clients, right? As in security stop that from happening. Okay, identity, server and database, APIs, and the password, credit card information, addresses, so sensitive information, right? Okay, these kind of the vulnerabilities are there. So these need to be secured from the attackers or the threat. Now we talk about the sessions, right? Now what is session? Session means if suppose you are sitting on the Google, you are taking the information from the Google server by asking different information. So whenever you start that session, that's called a in time to out time. It's called a session. Session means particular into out. Into out is a session. Okay. When someone log into a website, they provide their username and password. Suppose you log into Facebook or Instagram, right? There is session time. You can see in your Android or your iPhone on the screening time. So you can see the session time. That means how much time you log in and log out there. So, but signing in every time is inconvenient. So the concept of session is created depending on the sensitivity of the website, right? Depending on the sensitivity of the website, high for a bank's, low for a social media. The user remains logged on for a certain amount of time called a session. For bank, if you see the SBI Bank, Canada Bank, Punjab Bank, whatever bank is there, when you log in by using ID password, you can see there a certain time is going on about 10 minutes. So 9:58, 9:59 to 9:58 to 9:57, then 9, 8:59 to 8:58, 58, 40, 8:37, something like that. So 10 minutes you get to get any transfer, any transactions, right? So that's called a session time. Within that time, if you do not do that, automatically give you the logout, right? So that called a session time for particular users. So that user will be effective in that session only. If another session comes, so that for stopping the injection, stopping the attack, You have to log in and log out. You have to log in again from the user ID and password, right? So within a session, even if the client exits the application and re-enters it, they are authenticated by the browser without username and password, right? If the session ends, then the client needs to enter the username password again. Okay. If the session enter, need to password and username again. Okay. I hope we are understanding it. Okay. Now let's talk about the cookies or token. When you log into a website, the server sends the browser some secret, randomly generated number. You can see there are Chrome cookies, there are some whatever your site are using their cookies. That means the information, right? You leave the cookies, you store the cookies for the searching the same thing when it comes, right? So it helps the same things get back, right? So when you log in the website servers and the browser some secret randomly generated number along with the timestamp to the client's browser. These numbers are called the cookies or token. The server uses cookies and tokens to remember the identity of the client, right? Every time the client sends a request to that server within the session, they send the cookies along with the request. Suppose you have some session, you can see it's in Google Chrome also. You can see the cookies details, right? So accordingly, they give you the data or the process, whatever your information are entered or saved in a cookie format, right? Every time client send request to their server within the session, they send the cookies along with the request. Server identifies the token and validate the client, right? So through that available token, server identify the token and validate the clients. If an attacker steal the cookies or the token, if attackers steal the cookies or token, then the attackers can pose as the client, and the server will not know whether it's the attacker or the any actual client, right? So what happen if attackers steal the cookies only now? So attackers will behave like a client. So server will not know who is attackers, who is client, so they can give your information to them. So that's why cookies and token hijacking need to be secure. The attack is known as session hijacking. So session hijacking means to get the information of cookies or tokens so that attackers will look like as a client, and server cannot understand or security cannot understand which is the client and which is the theft or the threat, okay, or the attackers. Now next is attacks on the client server model. You know what kind of attacks are there? Open Web Application Security Project says there are the 10 top threats are broken access control, okay, broken access control points for the bad authentication and authorization. Second is security misconfigurations. So that means improper, insecure, or default setting in software, right? Hardware, cloud, network system, and create the vulnerabilities for hackers or exploits. Okay. Now, software supply chain failure is one of the threats. Cryptographic failure, SQL injectioning, insecure design, authentication failure, software data integrity failure, security logging or altering failures, mishandling or exceptional condition, mishandling of exceptional conditions. So these are the attacks on the client server model. So if we properly see the client server model, this is the server, client, network, what kind of, if the proper secure communication we need a ciphertext or some kind of cryptographic algorithm. But Open Web Application Security Project tells the threats are cryptographic failure. So we need to secure the proper cryptographic algorithm. Software supply chain failure, broken access control failure, security misconfiguration, injection SQL, that means the structured query language, or the cross-site scripting attacks, XSS. So what happens here? Insecure design, authentication failure, software data integrated failure, security login altering failure, mishandling of XML. So what is there? These are the Open Web Application Security Project top 10 threats, right? So cryptography, software supply, security configuration, misconfiguration, broken access like a bad authentication authorization, secure and the software supply chain and the insecure design, authentication failure, software data integrity failure, anything, security logging and alerting failure, software or data integrity failure, mishandling of exceptional conditions, right? So these are the top 10 threats of the from the OWASP. Okay, I hope you understood it. Now let's understand about the broken access control kind of threats of vulnerability. Broken access control means occurs if we talk about that, we can say that when a web application fails to restrict user action to their intended permission, allowing user to access, modify, delete sensitive data outside their authority. So that means a critical security vulnerability is where an application fails to properly restrict what authenticated users are allowed to do, right? That means the proper the proper authorization is not done. Then it's come to the broken access control. That means is a critical security vulnerabilities where an application fails to properly restrict what authenticated users are allowed to do. Rank as the highest on the OWASP top 10 list. It occurs when users can access data or perform actions outside of their intended permission. Right? So what happened? Maybe more than the permission, if they ask, then the condition of broken access or modifying users happen. Accessing sensitive data, details of financial information, performing admin level functions without authorization. Right? We understood our critical security value vulnerabilities where an application fails to properly restrict what authenticated users are allowed to do. Now, if we see the common examples, okay. So, what are the common examples? Insecure direct object reference, vertical privilege escalation, forced browsing, metadata manipulation. So, how to prevent it? Kind of there. Okay. Record ownership checks, ensure domain models or enforce principle of these privileges grant users absolute minimum level of access required to fulfill their specific job or task. Server side checks never rely on client side control like what happen hiding button in the browser UI. To enforce security, always validate authorization directly on the server. What happens here? Broken access control means what happened default by prevented. Any by default, right? So what happens? Server size checks happen, client side checks happen, and principle of least privilege happen, recording ownership checks happen so that it can be protected from the attackers. Okay. Let's see now. We understood about the completely broken access control occurs when a web application fails to restrict user action to their intended permission, allowing users to access, modify, delete sensitive data outside their authority. So what happened there? Now we talk about the SQL injection. We talk about the broken access control, right? We understood properly. If we talk about the SQL injection attacks, right? Standoff structural query language attack, right? I hope you understand the broken access control. Now is the structural query language injection attack. So structural query language injection attack happens what? Is a critical security vulnerabilities where an attacker manipulates an application's database queries by inserting malicious SQL code into the user input field. So what attackers do manipulates attackers manipulates an application's database queries by inserting manipulates application database queries, right? Okay. So what happened by inserting malicious SQL code into the user input field? So what happened into the user input field? Malicious, right? Code or input. That's why it's called a SQL. That means structure query language injection attack. Injection attack. Okay. So that insert malicious SQL code into user input fields when the application fails to properly sanitize or parameterize, right? When the application fails to properly sanitize or parameterize these inputs, the database executes the attacker's unintended command or kind of the lazy made code, right? So what happens if the this query language enters, then the unintended code will be run, right? So that means the proper intended things will not be executed. So SQL injection has historically been one of the most prevalent and dangerous web application vulnerabilities. Okay, it's kind of anything will be true, right? Right? You can say the in the experiment sometime in the lab experiment we do write this or this is same meaning, right? So that means the what query language is enter that disturb the proper login, authentication, and the inside details. Okay. So if we see here, every website use some code to drive information from the database. These codes are called a structure query language or SQL. What happen? They take user input from text fields and fill in the SQL queries. Now attackers can write their own code instead of text to get unauthorized output from the database. So now what happen? Your intended output also there, unauthorized output also there, and unauthorized login also there. So what happens? Proper proper input is disturbed by the some structure query injection. Okay, so you can see here, if we see here, admin and the login is there. Submit from users where user admin and password. Okay, and what happen here? Selects from user where username admin and password. Okay, so now what happen? Admin homepage you are logged in. So what happen? This homepage is also not secure due to the SQL injection. Okay, so it is without verifying, it makes the entering into the site. So what would be there? Malicious output comes, normal input is happen if a user input 105. Suppose user input a 105. Suppose user input a 105. Suppose user input a 105. Then what happen? The query transform into select is cross from users where user ID 105 or anything. So user ID will become 105. This is because the 105 is always true. The database ignores the required ID and dumps all records in the user table, exposing sensitive data like a password and email. So it will always be true, right? So common types of SQL injection is a classic, blind, and out of end SQL injection. How can we prevent it? That is important. How to prevent it? The important thing is how to prevent the SQL injection attack. Okay, how to prevent? How to prevent? How to prevent? That is important. So use prepared statement, use a parameterized queries. Okay. Stop concatenating strings. Never build a SQL queries by directly combining fixed code string with user input variable. Right. So first is a parameterized. Parameterized. Okay. Parameterized. Second is a concatenating. Stop concatenating. Concatenating. Okay, then later input validation. Then later what to do? Input validation. And then later on least privilege principle. Privilege. Least privilege. Okay, these kind of things are important to prevent. Okay, I hope we understood about the SQL injection attack and how to prevent those attacks, because SQL injection is the most common attacks on the web application security. Okay. Now let's discuss about the summary. We understood about the security requirement in software and web development. We also understood about the what kind of things are needed for the open web application security project, right? OWASP, Open Web Application Security Project. And then we understood about the identify common vulnerabilities and threats in web application, mobile application, distributed software, mainly in the web application. We will discuss more in details about the other things. Okay. So what is there? We understood properly about the kind of open web, open worldwide application security project. That is, we understood about the open worldwide. Okay. So that is a non-profit, right? Then we understood about the top 10 threats. Okay. And kind of the things, what is their OWASP. Okay. And what happened in OWASP? We see about the OWASP. There are different things that has to be gain out, that we understood about the what kind of threats there and how to stop them, right? We understood about the different kind of threats through the OWASP, like a broken access control, cryptographic failure, injection, insecure design, and different, right? Security configuration and so on and so forth, right? We understood about these things. We understood about the common vulnerabilities, okay, password, weak password information, these kind of things. Okay, we understood the defensive mechanism against that, how to prevent the SQL, how to prevent the broken access control, like those things we understood. Okay, so I hope we clear about it. Now I will just go from last to first again, and then later we will discuss 1 or 2 minutes, then we will finish it. Okay. So we will see it. We understood about the SQL injection attack. We understood about the broken access control and the preventing it. We understood about the open web application security project, top 10 threats. We discussed different things that is related to the bad authentication and authorizations, improper supply chain failure, weak password, SQL, insecure design, authentication failure, data integrity failure, kind of these things, mishandling the exceptional conditions, right? Then we understood about the cookies and tokens, right? That's called a session hijacking, if the hijack the cookies and these things, right? So some other will behave like a true person. Attackers will be like a true person. So what is session? We understood about the some time, which is the login logout time, we can say mostly. Important vulnerabilities: password created from your browser to server, database, client, server, secret files, cookies. Those are the vulnerabilities. We understood about the client server architecture also. Okay. We understood how does it www work, what are the important component, APIs, client and server. Okay. We understood these outline, we got it. Okay. We understood about the objective, and now we finished about the 8th lecture in the series of foundation of cyber security. Previous lecture we understood about the cryptography, the asymmetric, before that access control, before that security framework, and before that threats, vulnerabilities, and the risk management. Before that we start just the introduction to cyber security. Now in this lecture we understood about the web application security and open worldwide application security project and top 10 threats and what are the consequences. Okay, I hope you like this lecture, and if you like the, please click on the like button, share it, and please subscribe it. And if you share, maybe some other can listen it and can understand about the topic in a simple manner. And this slides is working based on the SR University, which is a prominent university in India. And thank you for listening this, and stay tuned for the next lecture. Thank you very much. Have a good day.